Now, I've made a couple of videos already about Chris Philp this week, but I couldn't let this one slide, because there's something deeply satisfying about watching a man who's lied for a living finally get told the truth to his face in public and with receipts. Chris Philp spent the last year repeating one fantasy after another. 100% removals, Rwanda would fix everything. But when Yvette Cooper stood up in the House of Commons, she didn't just fact-check him. She bulldozed through the spin and reminded the country exactly who broke the system in the first place. Let's not forget, this man was the immigration minister during the worst escalation of the Channel crossings in UK history. Under his watch, small boats numbers exploded, removals collapsed, and the much-hyped deterrent never even made it off the runway. Literally, those flights never took off. And yet he has the audacity to stand there and pretend that he had all the answers all along. Come on. Cooper didn't just expose his failure, she handed him his own words, his own broken promises, and showed us exactly what happened. A Tory government that spent 700 million on a deportation scheme that sent just 4 volunteers and paid 150,000 each for the privilege. No wonder they lost power. No wonder Philp is scrambling. He tried to attack the returns deal he once claimed was his top priority. He mocked the very thing that he failed to deliver, and when confronted with the facts, he had nothing. For once, the truth had the final word, and it wasn't Chris Philp saying it.
A year ago, she promised to smash the gangs. She said again and again that was her plan. Indeed, it was her only plan. Yet today, there is no mention of what was once her favourite catchphrase. Does she accept that she has lost control of our borders and she is failing in her most basic duty to protect the United Kingdom? Now, she says she has a new deal with France. Yet President Macron says this needs EU agreement. Her claim to smash the gangs was a gimmick, and so is her 6% returns deal. The truth is this: the only way to fix this is to remove every single illegal arrival as soon as they get here, without judicial process, either to their country of origin or to a third country. That would be a real deterrent. We saw this approach work in Australia about 10 years ago. And such a scheme, I'm glad the Honourable Member mentions that, such a scheme for the UK was ready to start in July of last year. The previous government had done all of the legal and logistical work needed. All she had to do was press go. But she and the Prime Minister cancelled it just days before it was due to start, and as a result, we now see record numbers crossing. Will she now admit she made a terrible mistake? And will she now start a proper 100% removals deterrent?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Shadow Home Secretary just wants to pretend that the last 8 years never happened.
It's the worst ever now.
He knows that this crisis, this small boats chaos, went on for 340 weeks under the Tories. A period in which, when he was Immigration Minister, overall migration near trebled and small boat crossings increased tenfold when he was the Immigration Minister in charge. And during the 340 weeks that the Tories were in charge when this happened, 128,000 people crossed the Channel. How many were returned to France? 0. How many were sent to Rwanda? Well, he said himself it was 0 because he didn't even want to count the 4 volunteers. And, he keeps saying, that somehow it was ready to start. If it had been ready to start, they wouldn't have called the election. They would have actually introduced the scheme that, in fact, had been running for more than 2 years at the cost of £700 million with just 4 volunteers sent. I can also tell him that since the election, this government has returned over 35,000 people who have no right to be here, and that is a 24% increase in enforced returns compared to the last year that his party was in charge. It is a 28% increase in failed asylum returns compared to the last year that his party was in charge. And as for agreement with France, that he doesn't seem to want to talk about very much, I actually asked him about exactly this when I was Home Affairs Select Committee Chair and he was the Immigration Minister back in 2020. And I specifically asked him, what chance do you put on being able to get a bilateral agreement, say with France, for them to take back people who have arrived here from France? And he said 5 years ago, that's what he was working on. Indeed, he told the committee one of our priorities will be to reach those agreements, and it is, I think, strongly in the French national interest to agree such a returns agreement. That gives me significant cause for optimism. Well, turns out he should have been optimistic about the return of a Labour government reaching an agreement where he failed. Here's what he also said. He said, "We intend to return as many illegal immigrants who have arrived by small boats as possible. We have flights planned in the coming days to return these individuals back to France, and we will be looking to ramp up this activity." Well, that was 5 years ago. Flights never went. The activity was never ramped up. The Shadow Foreign Secretary tried to return people to France. The Shadow Justice Secretary tried to return people to France. The Shadow Justice Secretary even called for the UK to, quote, take one asylum seeker from France in return for every one illegal migrant that we return to them. Or indeed, more than one. He said more than one. And as for interception in shallow waters, he said when he was immigration minister, some boats that are just 250 yards away from the French coast have just not been stopped by the authorities. This must change. I agree. But that was 5 years ago, and he didn't change a thing. Because they never understood that you don't change things just by jumping up and down and shouting about them. It needs partnership working and hard graft. That's what this government has done.
Can she confirm that those 4 volunteers that the government paid to send to Rwanda, that each of them was paid by the British taxpayer £150,000 to provide free housing, free university education and free private healthcare? Who approved that funding within the department?
Was it the Shadow?
Well, I can confirm that the deal that the previous government did with Rwanda involved paying £150,000 for every single individual to cover food and accommodation and healthcare, as he said, for 5 years. So those bills do continue. There was a concern raised by the accounting officer, so a direction had to be given on the basis that the ministers were advised it was not value for money, but they continued regardless.
After having all that pointed out to him, I still don't think he's going to stop thinking it was the greatest plan that the Tories ever came up with. But let me know what you think down in the comments. I'm not quite sure why the Tories aren't embarrassed about this, but to check it out, you'll need to see the video on screen now. So go watch that next. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button, and I'll see you next time.